Okay. Um, well, welcome. Sowatsuto Zen. My name's Kirk. I'm a Buddhist priest, of sorts. Today's March the 10th, and really nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming. It really, so touches me that everybody shows up on a Sunday afternoon and wants to think about Buddhist practice. Um, okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the last of the Eightfold Path, which is right concentration. But just to sort of, remember where we are, find ourselves, we've been unpacking the Eightfold Path for the last couple months. And then I'd say, just to remember what that's about, let's see, right view, sort of understanding the nature of reality, like cause and effect, karma, Four Noble Truths, I guess. Right intention, like having the proper sort of aspiration in the world. Right speech, I think that speaks for itself. Right action, like moral or ethical behavior. Talked about right livelihood, meaning avoiding professions that sort of harm other people or beings on the planet. Um, but also, I mean, like traditionally, bad professions in Buddhism would be like being a butcher or being a weapons dealer or selling intoxicating drugs or alcohol. Traditionally, those sources of livelihood would accrue very bad karma. And then we talked about right effort, like cultivating positive qualities in the world, and mindfulness, like paying attention to the present moment. And then that was Judith last week. And then, so today we're going to talk about right concentration, meaning trying to develop mental stability through the practice of meditation. And then cultivating some sort of, I guess, tranquil mind that comes from being free from distractions. So, but before I start on that, I want to talk about the term right. Like when we talk about the Eightfold Path, we're always talking about right, but right this, right that, but it doesn't really mean like opposed to wrong. I like in my point of view anyway. It's not it's not like you're being real judgy or like, like this is correct and that's not correct. I mean, that's a very sort of binary point of view. I mean, you might want to think about the term right as being happening more on a spectrum, meaning like what percentage of your life is aligned with like each spoke on the wheel of the Eightfold Path, meaning like the degree of appropriateness. So when we talk about right and wrong, it's not just a matter of just do no harm, or refraining from harm, but more on the spectrum of trying to actively do some good in the world. I mean, doing no harm isn't really the entire story. It's more along the lines of working for the benefit of all beings. So that is considered to be a very positive karma builder. Um, and then also just about the Eightfold Path in general, like we're talking about 8 ways to reduce your own suffering in the world and also the suffering of other people around you. I mean, people really respond better when you're aligned with what's wholesome in the world. I mean, that's really palpable, cause and effect in the material world. I mean, it's easy to feel that. People respond positively when you're upright. Okay, so just to talk about right concentration, what what I think we mean by that is trying to get some focus, some mental clarity that comes from directing your attention to just a single thing. And then, I mean, the story goes that that leads to deep meditative absorption and then insight. So, in that way, we mean what I mean by right here is I mean skillful, meaning you're doing something that's cultivating spiritual growth. But before I start on the concentration thing, I think I need to talk about thinking and about thought and about what I think the components of meditation are. I mean, one of the ways that, at least this is what happened for me, is that one of the ways I started to wake up from having a regular meditation practice is I started to see more clearly the way in which my my thinking mind keeps trapping my awareness like over and over again. It's like falling asleep and then waking up like 1,000 times in a row because there's a river of thoughts and coming forth. And each thought is like, hey, over here, think me, I'm real, I'm really real. But so when meditation is kind of the practice of trying to break your identification with thoughts and just allowing your experience to be what it is, whether it's pleasant or it's unpleasant or it's neutral. So it's not something that you're doing, it's more something that you're stopping to do, which is to be distracted by your thoughts. I think also it's not about going inward, at least for me, it's more, I would compare it more to opening, like a flower. Like you're trying to give your experience your full attention. And you could look at each, you could look at the world as if this moment was the very first moment of creation, because actually, this moment actually is. Just like on the topic of thoughts, I don't know what it's like for everybody else, but for me, like I wake up in the morning and my thoughts start. You know, my first thought, like, oh, I have to get up, eat some coffee, gotta sleep 10 more minutes. And then remembering all the things I didn't do. I didn't finish the laundry. Just like thought after thought after thought after thought. It's like a pile driver or like a trip hammer all day long, just thought after thought after thought. So there's some sort of a skill that starts to show itself when you have a regular meditation practice that's about drawing your awareness back from just thinking. But also, I want to say that thoughts don't ever stop. I mean, thoughts are always going to be present. That's just chemical, electrical stuff that comes from your brain tissue and your nervous system and your blood flow. I mean, your whole body is like a sensory system, and your brain is secreting thoughts the same way your pancreas is just secreting insulin. It's spontaneous, it's continuous, and there's this whole verbal machinery of the mind, which is like a river. You might just think of it as karma just running off. But the thing about meditation is that you start to see the ways in which your awareness keeps getting identified with thoughts. I mean, you're just constantly jumping from thought to thought, from emotion to emotion, from image to image, from planning to remembering, and then back and forth. I mean, it's like, I was trying to think of an image. This is the image that comes to my mind. There's a scene, this is kind of an obscure reference, I hope it flies, but that book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, where it's a very famous scene in American literature where Eliza's running away from Simon Legree and she's on the Ohio River and the ice is breaking up and she's just leaping from iceberg to iceberg. But for me, that's the river of thought. You're just jumping from one disintegrating thought form to the next. But one of the revelations of practice is that there's actually no substance to thought. They appear, they act like they're urgent, they act like they're very powerful, but they're actually just as insubstantial as a bubble in a stream. It's like the Wizard of Oz. It's all front and no substance. So once you start to see your predicament, when you have a meditation practice, you start seeing that it's not really meditation is not some kind of holy activity, you know? It's like, it's a technique. It's a technique for extricating your awareness from the identification with thought. And to do that, you just watch your thoughts coming and going. And you can just take one thought or one sensation and you can use that as a kind of leverage. like a primary object of meditation. And then cultivating what's called concentration, which is really about learning to keep your awareness on just a single thing. And then in the process of doing that, all your other thoughts that come up are sort of practices or maybe opportunities to let go of those and bring your attention back to the primary object of meditation. It's like the center of a flower could be the primary object of meditation. And then the mind just keeps going out and getting lost and coming back again. It's like falling asleep and waking up, and it's like 1,000 times. But you start to realize the possibility that you could be in a state of mind with just staying with one thought or one object in meditation, and that's really a thing. Also, you start to notice kind of the nature of thoughts that start taking your attention away. Like, my knee hurts, I'm hungry, I have to go to the bathroom. Does he really love me? Will I starve to death this winter? What was that noise my car was making? I mean, it just goes on forever. There's infinite varieties to each thought. And each thought or each feeling is a little more seductive than the last one. And each thought or each feeling is saying, I'm really real. You really have to believe me. So for me, like the hardest practice I've ever done is the practice of just doing nothing, like moving from doing things to just being. So I get convinced sometimes that I have to do something about something. And most of the time, I didn't need to do anything at all. I mean, that's not to say that you shouldn't never take any actions in the world, but responding to things and not reacting to things is a real sign of like emotional maturity and spiritual growth. So some of the practice is learning how not to get seduced by every thought that comes along. Because if you buy the thought, then it starts a whole sequence of activities. Then you call your mother and you let her have it for what she said last week. You sell the house, or you break up with your partner, you buy the sofa, you send off that email. And like not blowing things up is actually a really deep practice. Like just settling and holding and staying connected. It's really very difficult work, I think. So I've done a lot of like sessions and long sittings, and I really am highly aware of how my mind can create like scenarios, which I'm bound to act. Like I can sit there and I can look like I'm meditating, and I could just be totally lost in a sexual fantasy. Or another one for me is money making schemes. And then I could really look spiritual on the outside, like I got a Buddhist robe on. But I've sat through a retreat and been lost in a sex fantasy, and then woke up from that and then just having to sit with that quality in myself. I mean, but even that, it's like it's all limited. I mean, every fantasy gets boring in time, but you just keep coming back to the primary object of meditation, and then that's the practice. I mean, and then the technique you use depends a lot on sort of what tradition you're from. Like, for example, if you're a student of Vipassana, like most meditators work with the quality of breath. I mean, the breath is chosen because it's free and it's portable and there's nothing to actually believe in. And then, it's really a very handy. But you could place your attention on the tip of your nostrils and you could feel the in and out sensation of the breath, or you could pay attention to your diaphragm and the rising and falling of the muscle that's right below your lungs that causes inhalation and exhalation. And so, Vipassana really focuses on like the characteristics of existence, meaning impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and no self. But with those practices, you're trying to get insight into the nature of reality by just observing how impermanent and impersonal most experience is. I mean, at that level, reality just flickers. So that's a Vipassana practice. But we're Zen Buddhists and we do things a little bit differently. And I mean, depending on your technique, I mean, some people like they count when they start as a way to sort of gather themselves. And then if they start daydreaming, then they start over again, like counting to 10, but it's a way to get grounded. And then shifting your emphasis to sort of maintaining some sense of like open awareness and presence rather than just focusing on a particular object. So maybe you could start with the breath, then you could go to a body scan, and then just opening your awareness to thoughts and feelings and sensation, and then sort of a more panoramic view that's different from one pointed focus of meditation. And then whatever comes up, thoughts or sensations or sounds or emotions, you're not getting attached to those things or getting lost in them. I mean, the essence of like what's called shikantaza or like sort of Zen Buddhist meditation is non-grasping mindfulness. So we just sit with whatever comes up, you know, anything without getting entangled in it. So, I mean, with Vipassana, there's a real effort to direct your attention, but our practice isn't really that. It's our practice is not to control or suppress the contents of mind, but instead just allowing thoughts and perceptions to come and go freely, like big fluffy clouds
Oh,
passing through some big empty sky. Clint, can you mute yourself, please?
yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thanks. Um, so, mindfulness is kind of a bigger field, I mean, but also it's said that mindfulness is like the first energy and that brings about concentration, and then concentration gives birth to insight. And those are traditionally thought to be qualities of a Buddha. Sorry, just gonna mute Clint here for a second. Okay. But in terms of concentration, I mean, the purpose of concentration is to try to develop some kind of mental stability or clarity or some sort of one pointedness of mind. And then, the story goes that you could get into deeper and deeper states of meditative absorption, like samadhi. But now, having said all that, I think it's important for me to say what I think meditation isn't. So, I mean, sometimes it helps to say what something is not. So, some of the things I think that meditation is not is I don't think it's about having a blank mind. I mean, it's actually more about being alert and engaged with what's coming up and then sensing some kind of sensation. It has to do with a shift in your relationship to your thoughts. But so there's really not going to be a moment in which your thoughts aren't arising. I mean,
Kirk,
there's your thoughts and feelings are keep coming up, but you
Kirk,
could say that the percentage of your attention that's wrapped up in thoughts would decrease. And your awareness is more like a dimmer switch. And you can turn the lights up on your awareness that's not thoughts, and you can get more attuned to that. And then I think I would call that spacious awareness that kind of holds things. Or you could say the ground of existence from which everything's arising and passing away. I mean, and that's the value of small shifts of attention. So it's not about a blank mind.
Kirk,
Yep.
can you turn your video on?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was muting Clint and I turned myself off.
You're muted.
Sorry, I'm having all kinds of tech trouble. So yeah, I think it's about tuning into some sort of negative space. Like you get a sense that things are held together by something that's not easy to grab hold of. I also think it's not about reaching for a specific feeling. It's really about whatever happens. Some people are motivated to meditate because they want bliss or they want peace or they want some sort of maybe a final resolution to a feeling on some issue they've got. But our practice isn't that. Our practice is just to sit there and whatever comes up and notice it and watch it pass away, and realizing that all the stuff that comes up is not really you. It's all empty and like in a very good way. It's also not about positive thinking. So, some people think meditation's about toxic positivity and feeling good all the time, but that's not my experience. I mean, actually, sometimes I've felt a lot worse. You may feel better, but maybe not. but just realizing that you don't have any control over them. Thoughts come, thoughts go. We can relate to our thoughts differently, and then we can give them less power. It's also not about just being totally complacent. It doesn't mean that you're just surrendering. It means that you actively involved with what's going on and then trying to respond to things instead of reacting. I also think it's not about checking out or being disengaged. So, there's a kind of, some people use meditation as like it's an active mental trip where they're just directing their attention a lot, like very dry. I actually think that there's a heart component that you could say was heartfulness, that's about being present in the moment without judging yourself for feeling really critical. And then I don't think meditation's about being religious, even though Buddhism is a religion on one level. It's also a human capacity that's like, bigger than that. But I do think that meditation does have the effect of spiritualizing your life, because the power that's cultivated by that keeps pulling you back into the present moment. And then that's where the action is. So, those are things I think that meditation is not. So concentration power is just about your attention wanders and you bring it back to the object of focus each time that happens. It's kind of like lifting weights. Each repetition is making your muscle strength a little bigger. And then each time your attention wanders, your concentration gets a little bit stronger. So, but wandering and returning is really an expected part of the training. All meditators get lost in thought. That's everybody. That's an advanced meditator. It's not a remedial practice. That is the practice, like getting lost and then returning to this moment. And then you can really start to see how habituated you are to this like verbal descriptive machinery of your mind. Thinking about an experience is actually much different than actually having an experience. Sometimes it's a little safer sometimes to think about something than just to be immersed in it completely. So your sensitivity increases, and then you're just trying not to interfere with what happens. This attitude of letting go and not having this need to have things be different than they actually are in the present moment. So that's kind of like what's called equanimity. Equanimity is a little bit paradoxical because you can't make it happen. It's like you can sort of like invite it by relaxing and sort of doing the practice, but sometimes it doesn't work. But equanimity for me tends to come up when I have high concentration. So it's kind of like a grace, and that grace can descend on you with more practice. So those are the three skills I think you get: concentration, sensitivity, and equanimity. And then that's it. And we try to develop those skills by practicing them. And that's what I have to say about concentration today. So why don't we having said that, why don't we give it a try? Everybody can just pick an object that they'd like to meditate on. And your job is just to take note of what is arising and return your attention to the original object of meditation. And maybe that's your whole experience, but just letting things be just as they are with absolutely no interference at all. And we can sit for a few minutes and then come back and we'll have a little talk. All right. Thank you.